I spent my Saturday dragging home this colorful piece of old school machinery. This is a German vintage lathe of World War II vintage, 1943 according to the seller. It looks a lot like my Oscar Ehrlich lathe that has been occupying my workbench for most part of a year. So I've decided that the old Ehrlich has to go. Contact me if you're interested. Unlike the Ehrlich, I do have the legs for this machine, but I'm not sure if I'll use them. They sure look nice, but waste a lot of space, and there's no chip pan. Okay, so let's have a look at this machine. I'll show you what I found so far. Let's start with the 4-speed tailstock. I don't think there's much wrong with this tailstock. Everything seems to work. It's empty too, but you could bore it out to empty-3. There's quite a bit of meat on there. It has a cam lock mechanism, and that makes moving it around much easier. And it came with this nice 4-speed shifter knob. There's quite a bit of offset here, and that's a bit weird, but it might be nothing. The carriage is where the throttle starts. The cross slide is totally frozen up, and I noticed that the threaded rod in here was totally loose at the rear end. I was able to move it to this side, but now it's totally stuck. It also is very hard to slide back and forwards. It has a threading dial, and based on the fact that it has only one gear, I think the lathe is imperial. The dials, they are there but hardly readable. The saddle has the same locking mechanism as the Ehrlich, although on the Ehrlich it is missing. There's no locking mechanism on the cross side, whereas the Ehrlich has a very nice one. The tool holder is homemade, but I did find the original one in a box full of stuff. Here's a look at the apron. This ball handle is for moving the carriage manually, and I assume these are for the automatic feeds. The middle position is probably off, and the other ones are probably for the cross slide and the carriage. This one here is for engaging the half nuts used for threading. This here is a built-in carriage stop, and I like that a lot. There's quite a bit of play on this shaft. There's none on the lead screw. There is some wear on the lead screw, it is noticeable. This is a gapped bed lathe. You can remove that piece by taking out those bolts. There is some wear and some damage on the bed, but there are no ridges anywhere. However, if you move the carriage to the tailstock, it does tighten up things, so that's a clear sign of wear. Here's the Norton gearbox with 18 feed rates. Unfortunately, both levers have been broken off, so this lathe probably fell over at some point. With this lever broken, you can't keep it in gear, and you can see they already tried to fix it once, because there is some bronze here, or copper. I do have the broken off parts. Well, at least for this lever. For this one it is missing. I wonder if this is the same cock that made Dutch lathes back in the 50s. According to this table, you should be able to cut widward and metric thread with this lathe. You can also see the feed rates here. It looks like you need some change gears to cut metric thread, but it's unclear to me what change gears you need for cutting widward, or and that probably also works for imperial. because I believe they have the same TPI. I will need to study this table a bit more. All the oil here came out when we hoisted the lathe. It tilted to one side and it came out through the forward reverse lever. This is a 3-speed headstock. You can see the gears in the casting here. It also has a back gear, so that's a 6-speed total. And it maxes out at 490 RPM. And that makes me believe that this is a bronze tapered bearing headstock. There's also an oiler, which is basically a small cup with a piece of felt in there. It was looking pretty dry. Here is a spindle lock, and this is the forward reverse tumbler for the carriage. On the rear of the headstock is a clutch lever for the clutched pulley. The lathe came also with a V-groove pulley. It also has a clutch mechanism. The fit of this cover leaves something to desired. And here is the next major problem. Just like with the Adler lathe, lots of broken teeth. Not all gears are this bad. Most of them are pretty okay. Unfortunately, this one is needed to cut metric thread. Here's another one that is missing a few teeth. And I also need to figure out which gears I need for the correct feed rates on the gearbox. And on the other end of the headstock we find the chuck, which is also a pretty sad looking thing. It looks like the bolts were too long and they just added a knot. There's extra holes in the back plate and they have been grinding on it. No idea why. The jaws are a bit loose and they have been welded up and reground. I'm also missing the outside jaws, and on top of that the chuck key is broken. Now I hear you thinking, I saw lots of chucks laying on that pallet, and you're right, but none of those fit this spindle. So there's at least 200 kilos worth of chucks, and they are worthless to me because none of them fits the lathe. This is a newer type of chuck. It fits a lathe with a tapered nose. This is an interesting one. It's a 4-jaw within a 3-jaw design. This is the only chuck with a back plate, which doesn't fit. This chuck here looks like the chuck that I refurbished, so I think it might be a 3-jaw within a 3-jaw design. And this here, it's the only chuck I've ever seen with a small Gitz oiler for some lubrication. And the last one over here is a little independent Cushman chuck. No extra jaws, no jaws whatsoever, no extra jaws required, no extra jaws. And there's a set of extra jaws that fits none of the chucks. And there's also another one over here. It's a single jaw, basically a paperweight. Oh well, they're all paperweights. And here's a look at the motor. It's a single phase 1-horse unit. It's pretty old, maybe from the 50s. It's not the original motor because the plate it mounted to isn't original. The bracket underneath that plate seems to be original. If you go to lathe.co.uk and look up Fischer, there's a blue lathe there which has the motor mounted directly to the headstock on the location of where normally the clutch pulley would be. Probably not original, but I thought it was interesting. This motor has grease nipples for the bearings. I believe you need to turn those down, and that way you push a little grease into the bearing. I think it works that way, but don't believe everything I say. This is the steady rest that came with the machine, but it doesn't belong with the machine. As you can see, the clamp is not wide enough to grab both sides of the bed. It is also tilted slightly to the right, but this should be fixable with a wider clamp and a few shims. Talking about clamps, I got two more. This looks to be homemade. This looks original, but it is not the same as on the tailstock. This clamp probably belonged to this base plate that used to be underneath the tailstock. It seems to fit nicely, but it's at least a centimeter higher than the one on the tailstock, so this also doesn't belong with this machine. The things you get when you buy an old lathe. And here's a box with odds and ends that came with the machine. And I think most of this belongs to the lathe. I didn't notice a ball handle missing. And the spindle seems to be complete. These are the tool bits that came with the lathe. And there were at least 100 of those triangle shaped bits. They look like inserts, but there's no hole. I don't know what those are for. And here's a look at the legs or stand that belongs to the machine. It looks nice, but like I said, not really efficient if you want to store some stuff. It does have a very nice embossed logo. I like that. Well, that's about it. I think I covered everything I discovered today. I'm hoping I can get it back on its feet as soon as possible. And then I got to see if I can get the motor running again. Throw in some new oil because most of it ran out. And then it is time for testing. But that's something for another video. To be continued. And finally, a bit of sad news. I managed to tip over my AI Hamburg shaper. Never got to use it. I'm not going to repair it. So if anybody is looking for parts for a AI Hamburg shaper, send me a message. It's a damn shame I never got to use it. Well, I guess I bought an expensive machine clamp.